Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET here in Boston, at least, not where our guest is today. You have found us on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze here on Facebook, and we welcome you to today's interview. I am your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 13 novels of suspense. And my newest is Her Perfect Life, so casually, note this way, displayed behind me. I'll never get used to the screen. And the new one is called The House Guest, which the cover just came out. So follow me on Facebook and Instagram to see this. I am so excited, you all, today to have the absolute honor of being able to interview Sulari Gentill, whose newest book is The Woman in the Library. I'm going to click over so I can see all of your comments coming through. Hi, Shannon Hansen. Hi, Pamela. Hi, Anissa. So many people joining us today. If any of you have been around me in the past couple of weeks, you will know that The Woman in the Library, Sulari's new book, The Woman in the Library, is one of my favorites. I have just been telling everybody about this. So Sulari, when you make the bestseller list, it's because of me.
I'm sure.
I'm sure too. This new book came out today in the US. And Sulari was just telling me that she was sleeping through the first couple of hours of pub day. And why is that, Sulari?
Oh, because I had to be up early to be on Crime Time.
But you are in Australia, where it is
I
17 hours later than it is here in Boston. So
Yes.
you have made it till tomorrow?
Indeed. It is the 8th here today rather than the 7th. And it is about 5:30 in the morning.
You're so brave and you are so wonderful. We're so grateful that you are here today. So happy Pub Day, US Pub Day at least. Let me read you all this hilarious, one of the most wonderful reviews of The Woman in the Window. The Woman in the Library, Woman in the Library. I have to learn to say that. It says, investigations are launched, fingers are pointed, potentially dangerous liaisons unfold, and I was turning those pages like there was cake at the finish line, says Maura McDonald of the Seattle Times. And she made The Woman in the Library one of the must-read books of the summer, I think, of the year. Certainly, Shannon Hansen is saying, I definitely want this book. And I saw that it was #1 on the holds of the library for U.S. libraries. #1 on the holds. What do you think about that?
It's a little bit surreal for me. I've been so completely blown away by the reception to this book. You put a book out in the world and you hope that people will like it and that it'll make friends. But when it just sort of takes a life of its own and gets this kind of momentum, it's a little bit stunning. So I think I'm still in that state of not quite sure whether I'm dreaming. So I remember Moira's review, and for someone who loves cake as much as I do, it was the perfect review.
I love that very much. Oh, you're getting stellar stars from everywhere. I know Publishers Weekly called it thrilling and poignant and profound and page turning and all those words. I love what you just said about not ever knowing whether the book will make friends. Talk a little bit about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, I've always thought that a book is a kind of a legacy for a writer. Once you let go of your book, it's a little bit like sending your child to school. They have a life of their own. They start to exist in the minds of other people, whereas until that point, they were only in existence inside your head. And so you send them out into the world to make their own way, and they, make friends, or sometimes they end up that lonely child. And you don't care about them any less, regardless. But when they make friends, it's just it's not only a feeling of success or whatever you have as a lawyer. It's a feeling of knowing that this thing that you created has an existence completely outside you. It doesn't need you anymore. It's in the minds of readers, and it's almost like you've given it a life and it can go on now and lead its own.
It's interesting though, because there's a book that I read a million years ago by M.T. Anderson, Tobin Anderson, called The Clue in the Linoleum Lederhosen. If you've ever heard of it, it's a crazy title. One of the ways that what the book is about, I'll just say briefly, is it stars three characters from novels. And they have learned that when people stop taking the books out of the library, that they as characters die. And it's a story of how, their goal to keep the people reading their books so they can stay alive. And this is sort of what you've described.
Yeah, it's 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 this amazing, I don't know, there's something about writing that has a sort of a sense of immortality about it, and not immortality for me, but immortality for what I create and the people I create. So every time for the rest of existence, it's possible for each of those characters to live, long after I'm dust. And that's a lovely feeling, because I love those characters. I'm wedded to them. I want them to go out and make friends, and to learn to live in other people's heads and have other people imagine them.
Because we think about them long after we close the book. I certainly know that when I read The Woman in the Library, I have thought about these characters long after, and about you, the author, long after. I was just seeing, somebody was saying in the comments, when I look over here, I'm looking at the comments, and look how many people are here: Mindy and Sherry and Gail and Judy and Bozania and Brenda and oh my golly, where I'm just looking for this one comment that says, she said that she had tried to check the book out of the library and the wait was months. And I agree with somebody in the comments saying, oh, here's Brenda, 22 on the hold list, several months wait for the ebook on Libby. They just need more books, right? Somebody said that.
Yes. Well, yeah, look, I think it's lovely that people are getting into line for this. And look, the other thing about a book is that it doesn't age, or it doesn't go off. It's not like a tub of yogurt. So when you eventually get to the head of the list, it'll still be there, and hopefully all the magic that was there on the first day is still there.
It definitely is. It definitely is. Let me interrupt this. I'm so eager to let you talk about this book and how it came to be. But let me welcome you all again here today. Hey, Christina. Welcome you to Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. A Mighty Blaze was started more than 2 years ago, ridiculously, at the beginning of the pandemic, to keep us all together and keep us talking and keep us discovering new books. And wow, has it been successful. We are so pleased. The couple of dozen volunteers who keep it running, started by Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt, and the two of them have brought us here together to read today about and hear today about The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentill. I'm now going to keep talking and read Sulari's bio so you all know who she is. Hi, Sherry. Hi, Shanson. So here's a quick official bio. After setting out to study astrophysics, graduating in law, and then abandoning her legal career to write books, Sulari Gentill now grows French black truffles on her farm in the foothills of the snowy mountains of Australia. Gentill's Roland Sinclair mysteries have won or been shortlisted for the David Award and the Commonwealth Writers' Prize, and her standalone metafiction thriller, After She Wrote Him, won the Ned Kelly Award for Best Crime Novel in 2018. Her 10th Sinclair novel, A Testament of Character, was shortlisted for the Ned Kelly Best Crime Novel in 2021. And your bio, Sulari, talked about metafiction. So let's talk about what that means before we start talking about The Woman in the Library, if any of you don't understand that. And I'd love to hear Sulari's explanation of that.
I think of metafiction as books about books. So do you know those watches or those clocks where you can see the inner workings, where they have a sort of a transparent case? I think metafiction works a little bit like that. It shows the inner workings, but it writes a story into the inner workings of how a novel comes together. So yeah, it's funny. I remember After She Wrote Him was my first metafiction, but I didn't realize it was. I just had written a story, And I'd sent it to my publisher, who was Barbara Peters, of Poison Pen Press at the time. And she wrote back and said, "Oh, this is a wonderful work of a wonderful postmodern work." And I have to admit that I had to Google postmodern to find what I was talking about.
Well, Barbara knows her stuff, certainly. And because The Woman in the Library it centers on a well-known author who's writing a book about a person who's writing a book.
Yeah.
So it's several levels of, as you say, the intricacy of the process of writing a book and the process of storytelling and all the little bits and pieces that go in and get turned like a Rubik's Cube, how that works, plus the book. How would you describe what this book is?
I think this book is a story within a story, but it's folded into the pages of a correspondence. And what it does is it looks at the influences and the external things that come into the making of a story, but it plays with the point at which the story goes from being something that a writer constructed into a reality in and of itself. So I'm really interested in that idea where words coming after words and sentences coming after sentences suddenly become story. There's a point at which all of a sudden there's a world and a life and relationships, and it's a story. And I've always been interested as a writer in the point where that magic happens, because I think even for writers, we sit and we talk about process and we talk about what we do ad nauseum. But even for us, there is a little bit of mystery and magic in what we do that we can't explain. It just happens. And so I find that in some ways the ultimate mystery. And so that's why I think I have this fascination with metafiction in writing crime mysteries.
I love that. I love that description, and I understand completely. I think what you're talking about that moment. I mean, we write and write and write, and I'll think, okay, yeah, she did this. Yeah, okay, she did that. Okay, he did this. Okay, why did they do that? And at some point along the way, you think, oh, are you kidding me? That's what this is about. Okay, and you get this power, or as you say, magic. Where suddenly the seed that you planted, you can see what it's growing up to be.
Yeah, and it seems to take a life of its own at that point. And I always think to myself, if the seed hasn't started to germinate in the first 10,000 words, it's not going to germinate, and I abandon.
Have you done that? Have you abandoned stories?
I think I've abandoned one or two where, it seemed like a really good idea, but in the first 10,000 words, there was no life.
Oh.
There was no life other than what I was putting into it. And so I don't know if I call it abandoned, I call it shelved.
Because I mean, I wonder whether, with the right sunlight and the right water that might blossom. Maybe it just wasn't the book's time
in there. Yeah. So, I have a few that I shelved because no writing's ever wasted, because you can always cannibalize it for another book if you need to.
And it's still in your head, and it's still practice.
Yes. And I always kind of feel a responsibility to characters that I create. It's what I said before. When they exist only in my head, they die with me. And I feel a responsibility to give them their chance in the sun, to give them their chance to meet other people and carry on without me. So, in the back of my mind, all the characters I've shelved are calling to me saying, come on, my turn.
That. I absolutely love that. That's good. That's great. I mean, I know that in one of the books I was writing, I was having trouble writing it. And I thought, come on, girl, to this character, let's just show me some life. And I changed her name, and she just sat up and she said, okay, here, watch me go. I had just given her the wrong name.
Yeah. Yep. And sometimes it's as simple as that, or there's the name or a background, or sometimes it's throwing a hobby their way. and all of a sudden they they pick up. So it's hard to know, because they're like real people. It's, you can't, one size doesn't fit all, and you can't expect them to carry on without you handing over a little bit of control to them.
Exactly. Well, if they take it, that's great. If they take
Yep.
it, that's great. Let's go back to the woman in the library briefly, because I know everybody is wanting to hear about this, and it is so enchanting. The cover copy of this book says, and I'll read it: four strangers sitting at a reading table at the Boston Public Library hear a scream and are bonded by this experience during the investigation. But it's really about the woman writing that story, and also a person who's sort of maybe giving her ideas for that story. And it starts with a letter. How much can you tell us about that structure?
Okay, so I'll tell you where the origins of the idea for this book came from, and that'll probably give you a little bit of a clue about where that character's going, but I think he'll surprise you anyway. So I was writing another book set in America, and the reason I wanted to do it is I had been published in America, and I felt this surge of warmth for America and Americans, because they had been so accepting of the Roland Sinclair series, which of course are set in Australia. And the best thing that a writer can give as a gift, or can do to say thank you, is to write a story. So I thought, right, I'm going to set my book in America, just to almost say to my American readers, I read you and I appreciate you. I see you and I appreciate you. And so I was writing this book in America without having been there. And certainly without having been to the East Coast. And I was communicating with a friend of mine who is a Harvard man. He happened to be in Boston at the time. So Larry's also an American writer, and he writes nonfiction. And he was researching a book called The Theft of Privilege in Boston. He was sitting in the Boston Library, and he was emailing me, and I would ask him questions about the city so I could get some authenticity of place in the book I was writing. And it happened to be a Roland Sinclair book. But Larry is a much, much better researcher than me. As you know, as true crime and this nonfiction people tend to be, it's all about facts for them, whilst fiction writers, we get carried away in the bits that we make up. So he was doing research at a level that I could never consider. So instead of just answering my questions, he's sending me maps, and he's sending me menus and places to go. He's sending me footage of sidewalks and weather reports. And then one day there was a murder a couple of blocks from where he was staying. And he thought, it'd be handy for Sulari to know what crime scene tape and coroner's vans look like in America. So he went over there, and after the body had been removed, and he took footage of the crime scene. And so in Australia, I'm sitting there, I get an email in from Larry, and I open the file, and it's a crime scene. And my husband, who happened to be standing behind me, said, gosh, I hope Larry's not killing people so he can send you research. And I thought, I'm certain that he's not, but gee, that's a good idea for a story. And so that book started Dear Hannah. And I'm a pantser, so I don't plot at all. So that's just all I knew, was that there was this correspondence in the beginning, and a writer in Australia putting her trust in a writer in Boston, and the relationship between them, and within that would be a story. And so I just started writing, and this story unfolded.
I mean, it's quite amazing, because the story that you just described, it's not a spoiler, because that is not, you don't need to know anything about that except what Sulari just said. Just read the book purely. But it does start out, Dear Hannah, and there is a letter from a person named Leo, who was attaching a picture of the Boston Public Library and talking about how beautiful the ceiling is. Yeah. And then it goes chapter 1, And there is a story about a writer writing a novel, and she's trying to write a novel, and she's in the Boston Public Library. And you see the process. There are all those T-shirts that say, "Be careful what I'm a writer. Be careful what you say around me. You could end up in my book." And all of those little magpie tidbits that she gleans from the letter get twisted and changed, and it's a treasure hunt for the reader to not only read the story to find out what happens in the mystery, but to see what came from Leo and why.
Absolutely. And you never hear directly from Hannah in this novel. All you see is the chapter that she writes in response to the email that she gets from Leo. And that, in some ways, people read this novel and they come in with very specific opinions about Hannah and what Hannah said and what Hannah did. And it takes me reminding them that they've never heard from Hannah directly, because all they've seen is her story. But, in a lot of ways, writers are what they put in their stories. It's, you can find me in my stories. They're not about me, but you can find me there. So I wanted people to get a feeling for Hannah, not by what she said about herself or what she said to Leo, but those things that she gathered, those little tidbits that she gathered from him, what she chose to put in and what she chose to put out, and eventually what she refuses to put in.
I mean, and you're bringing us to the way that you deal, and this is sort of fast forwarding, but the way that you deal with COVID in the book is by having, well, you talk about it.
Well, it's a real dilemma for authors, COVID. There are a lot of readers who say, look, I just don't want to read about it. I take my reading to escape from the realities of the world. I have to deal with COVID every day. I don't want to read about it. So the authors have tended to fall into two camps. With some little subgenres in those camps. There's the authors who won't mention COVID, pretend it won't happen. So every story is set in 2019 before the world changed. And then
or
there's
some imaginary non-time.
Yeah. And, and I have had comments, even in the draft stage where there was consideration or there was feedback that maybe I should take all references to COVID out and make the novel timeless. The problem with that is it doesn't become timeless. It just becomes pre-2019. It becomes a time before. And in some ways, ignoring COVID is a little bit like ignoring World War II. When you have something that changes the world, then surely you have to, or surely you don't have to, but surely it demands a little bit of acknowledgement in the general transgress of a contemporary novel. The novelists who are putting it in sometimes deal with COVID as a near past event. So we've just got out of COVID. And that's fine. But the problem with that is it's a little bit of a risk because we don't know when it will end and how it'll end.
But the way you deal with it is so beautifully, which is sort of by having the discussion.
Yeah. So that discussion for me, whether COVID goes in or out is less interesting than the discussion, than the human tangle that is created with writers and readers having this argument about whether a human tragedy on a massive scale can be left out of literature or not, and what the responsibilities of literature are in that sense. The problem with COVID, of course, as Hannah is always saying, is that it kidnaps a narrative. Once you start putting COVID into a contemporary novel, it becomes about COVID. And we haven't got to a stage where we can just sort of talk about COVID without it being the subject of the novel. And so I can understand writers saying, no, that's not what my novel's about. That's not what I want to talk about. But then on the other hand, there's a school of thought that says, well, that's cowardly.
But you see how, when you all who are listening to this right now, and again, make sure you leave a comment or a question in the comments. Where else would you put the comments? About the woman in the library. copy of The Woman in the Library. But the way Sulari deals with this, you all, in the book, is to have the very discussion that we're having now about whether COVID should be in books. And that is, again, this meta way that Sulari has written this incredibly engaging and extremely clever and riveting novel. You also talk about, as you were talking earlier, about the clear watch and the gears that you can see, the inner workings. You show the inner workings of how a writer's mind works. And you were saying earlier that you're seeing, we can see you in the book. Does the way Hannah, the author who is writing this book in the book, does the way she writes mirror the way you write?
The way Freddie writes, so this is
Freddie. Exactly.
the writer that
Freddie
Hannah
is
is writing.
So Hannah is you all, I'm going to get this straight, and this is why the book is fun. Hannah is the real writer who is writing a book about a fictional writer, Freddie. So Freddie is way Freddie writing the book and the way Hannah's writing the book, because there are two people writing in this. And you, so three, actually. Who
and
writes?
Then there's Kane. Then there's Kane, who's also writing a book.
There's Kane, another character who's also writing a book. I'm trying to make you all realize how ingenious and clever this is, and I am not helping right now by this question. Trust me, it's fantastic. So tell a little bit about whether you write the way that Freddie writes.
Yes, so I do. I'm a pantser, so you use that term in America as well. I write by the seat of my pants. I don't plot at all. And I'm an extreme pantser. I do no plotting. I just sit down and I go straight in. And I tend to be pretty close to one draft. So I work forward from page one. And so I don't write all over the place and try to patch them together. I just start on page one and I keep going until the last page, and I don't go backwards. So if I find myself having written a problem, I solve the problem rather than go back and take the problem out. And that's, and I build, and those problems in some ways are part of the twists and the turns in the route of the bus that as Freddie describes her writing process. She talks about it being hopping on a bus and then just watching who gets on, who gets off, and having no idea where the bus is going.
Let me read that. Let me read that to you all, because I just happen to have that little section of the book right here, because it is so marvelous the way you talk about how Freddie thinks, which is, she says, I am a bricklayer without drawings, laying words into sentences into paragraphs, allowing my walls to twist and turn on whim. There is no framework, just bricks interlocked to support each other in the story. I have no idea what I'm actually building or if it will stand. Perhaps I should be working on a bus. That would be more consistent with my process, such as it is. I'm not totally without direction. There is a route of some sort, but who hops on and who gets off is determined by a balance of habit and timing and random chance. There is always the possibility that the route will be altered at the last minute for weather or accident, some parade or marathon. There is no symmetry, no plan, just the chaotic, unplotted bustle of human life. Now that just brings tears to my eyes, Sulari, and I hope to you as well. How was that to write?
That was just a moment of sheer honesty. That's just the way I write. So for me, it felt like I was just confessing. And for a long time, funnily enough, I used to be quite ashamed and quite embarrassed about the way I wrote. It always felt to me like it was a not serious way of writing, like I didn't have the commitment to plot. I was just sitting down and writing like, it's a, like I was doing brain surgery.
By guessing, learning on the job.
Going in and cutting. And I used to be at festivals and so on, when people had asked me that process question, I'd be quite embarrassed about the fact that there was no plotting involved, because it sometimes can sound like there's no care involved, and that's just not the case. It's the way my mind works and the way my brain works. I presume somewhere in my subconscious something is plotting, It's just not telling the conscious part of my mind until it's necessary.
No,
Uh,
I embrace this fully, and that's exactly how I write,
yeah,
exactly, without having any idea. And I do think, and maybe this will give you a way to think about it. I've been a television reporter for 40 years. And so I will have an idea for a story, a news story, but I don't know what it is. I'm an investigative reporter. So I don't know what the story is. I don't know what the ending can be. I don't know what's going to happen or who's involved or what they're going to say, because that's why I'm investigating.
yeah,
So I spend my time as a reporter in search of the story, in search of the story, in search of real life. And
yeah,
so when I'm writing my manuscript, I think, well, it's the same thing. I'm
yeah,
in search of the story. And at some point, just as you were saying, if it is a real story, the doors will start opening, which is how I look at it. And people and the book starts saying yes to me, and I start
yeah.
understanding it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's very much how it works for me. And it's the most wonderful immersive ride too when you work that way, because you have got to trust the creative process completely. Otherwise, there's always a point at about 3/4 of the way through a novel where I think, oh no, I've written myself into a corner. I don't know what to do. And at that point, every single novel, 15 novels now, every single novel, you've just got to take a deep breath and keep writing. And it seems to resolve. It seems to work out. There's always that moment of panic where you think, oh no,
You
I've
know,
just wasted.
this is why I love you. We are as far away physically from each other as anybody could possibly be. I mean, really almost think about that, as far away physically as anybody could possibly be. But we think exactly the same way. We think exactly the same way. And my word to you is this. I have learned, after exactly the same number of novels, to embrace the panic, because this happens to me every time. And for 40 years as a reporter doing a story, it's happened every time. Oh no, this isn't going to work. I don't have the stuff. I forgot to ask the right question. Why didn't I take the picture of this? This isn't going to work. This is going to be the time that it isn't going to work. And then I think, no, you always think that. And then I think, no, but what if this is the time? What if this is the time that it actually isn't going to work? And I thought there was a moment that I thought, wait a minute. Every time you have this panic, the next step is the answer.
Yeah,
So when you get to the panic part, just say, yay, I'm in the
yeah,
panic part, because the next step is going to be going to fix it, is going to solve
yeah,
it. So
yes.
embrace the panic is how I.
Indeed. Yeah. I think, maybe we need that panic to come up with something truly ingenious, or that final twist to work everything up, for everything to fall into place. But it does seem to be a consistent thing. And, it's sort of, hello, panic, my old friend.
Yes, 100%.
And in a way, I think if I wrote a book without the panic, I'd start to worry about the book.
See, we are the same person. We are totally the same person. Do not let me forget, though, you all, to tell you that The Woman in the Library is a murder mystery of the first water. It is marvelous. It is a wonderful story. It's a mystery within a mystery. And one of the things I love about this, besides the 4 amazing characters, 5, really, maybe 6, maybe 7, oh my golly, see, I don't know, but I could name them for you, is that it is supremely fair. It is absolutely nothing held back, no holds barred, no tricks. The reader knows everything. Was that important to you?
Yes, I think I cut my teeth on Agatha Christie when I was a child, and those were the puzzle books.
Mhm.
And there was this rule about fairness, about knowing, and you always knew whenever you read a book where a character came in from left field, or there was a piece of information that the detective didn't share, you felt cheated. And so it's always been my practice to play fair with the reader, even though books have evolved beyond that whole puzzle book,
Sure.
their status. And it, quite often, the wonderful thing about crime fiction is that it allows us to talk about so many things in addition to murder. In fact, the murder is just the vehicle by which we have conversations about society and justice and equity. and whatever takes our fancy at the time. But the puzzle still is the root of a mystery novel, and I think if you don't play fair with the reader on the puzzle aspect, you lose their trust in the rest of the conversation.
Yes, exactly. You lose their trust. That is exactly right. And I do love, and not it's not just a puzzle mystery, and it's not just one murder mystery, and it's really not just two murder mysteries that get solved, but it's also psychological. It is a really psychologically clever, evolving story. Did you know? And just I'm being careful. Did you know how that would evolve?
No, not when I began. So when I began, I did want to set the story within a correspondence, but I really, what I was looking at the time was that would be a wonderful vehicle to talk about Australia and America and the differences, uh, because it's one of those things. Australia and America are similar in so many ways, but the differences, though they are subtle, are really telling in the way our societies have evolved. And I thought, well, that'd be a really wonderful way to talk about those differences without having it bog down the story. To set it into the correspondence. But of course, the correspondence took a life of its own. And one of the things that I forgot to mention in the whole bus analogy is that sometimes the bus is hijacked by characters.
And
Sometimes,
is that what happened?
and yeah, sometimes they just take over. Sometimes they just take the wheel, and you've got to go until you can wrest them back from the wheel. And I think that's what happened with this very early on. Leo um, Leo was in control, or
Well, Leo
decided
was
to,
the person who was writing the letters to Hannah and
yeah. So
sending her the pictures and the info and correcting her Australian isms into being American and giving her ideas increasingly throughout, and more we will not
yes,
say. So the Margaret, the producer, is reminding me that it is time for questions. I know I could talk to Sulari forever about The Woman in the Library, but the more I talk, the less time you have to go to the library yourself or to the bookstore and get your very own copy of it. But let's take some questions and then we'll give away a copy too. Gail, good question. How did Sulari keep track of her story while writing the book within the book?
I don't I, I don't keep track. I just keep writing. And I figure that if it's important, I'll remember it. And I'm really immersive when I'm writing. So the problem is not really keeping track of the book, it's keeping track of the rest of my life.
Okay.
So,
Well, that's interesting because it's very intricate. All those, as you say, the bricks fit together very carefully. So there were no holes when you got to the
no
end?
fans, no holes, no holes. So I have this very bizarre method in that when I write, when I'm actually writing a novel, I watch television. And it's always, I've
While
got
you're writing?
while I'm writing, I watch television, and it's always something um, quite predictable. So something like Midsummer Murders or those BBC crimes where it has a very distinct pattern. So you don't have to pay a lot of attention, but you can sort of follow it with 30% of your brain, is what I think. And so I watch that and I write. And the reason for that, again, this was one of these things that I was very ashamed of for a long time until I met a wonderful writer called Kylie Ladd. And Kylie is a cognitive psychologist as well as being a writer. And she said to me, no, 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 that makes perfect sense, because the creative center of your brain is in your prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is very difficult to access directly. So that's why when you lose a word and you're trying to find the word, you can't think of it, but you go off and you do something else and suddenly the word pops into your head. So it's that phenomenon, that that process. and uh, and so so for me, what I'm doing is I'm distracting my brain so all the words pop in to my head, and it's allowing my prefrontal cortex to take control of the story. And yeah, so that's kind of the way I work. I can't work in silence. I've got to be in the middle of something that's slightly distracting, and then my prefrontal cortex writes the story. And I presume that somewhere in my prefrontal cortex, something is plotting and making plans and making sure that threads tie up. But consciously, I'm completely unaware of it. For me, it's just sitting there and writing.
You see that I'm speechless here. There's a first. There's a total first. I mean, your prefrontal cortex must be very special. I can't even imagine. I mean, I know when I used to do homework, I would listen to music, but that's not the same.
No,
Does it make you focus on the book more?
it
Or
makes
not
me focus less. It makes me focus less. So sometimes focusing too much on individual bricks is inhibiting. So what that does is it allows me to stand back and see the building that will be. I suppose it's a weird thing. I thought I was a freak until I was speaking about this at a writers festival, and I was sitting next to a writer who's a complete plotter, and she was just aghast and horrified, and she's screaming no as I'm telling people about this. But in the corner of the hall, there was a group of people, and they were all nodding.
Oh.
And they came over to me afterwards, and they said, we were so happy to hear you say that, because that's the way we write. And they all happen to be lawyers. So I'm a lawyer. I'm from a legal background. So maybe there's something about the legal training. And I suspect it's not so much that lawyers are trained to watch television to concentrate. I think it's because your legal training can be so inhibiting to writing, because it teaches you a particular type of writing. You have to, in order to tap into your creative side, you have to try and distract all the things that you've learned in your legal career that says, precedent and obiter dictum and
Exactly.
Yeah.
My husband's a lawyer too, and I don't think he could write a novel, because this is how he talks as well, which is good. I love having in-house counsel for my mysteries. That's great. But I see what you mean about the structure and the sort of lingo that lawyers, the way they have to write. Our time is running out so much. Mighty Blaze is saying it's like waving a stuffed bunny at the toddler for a good photo, because why? They relax, they're distracted by the stuffed. Yeah. I mean, that's good, Margaret. That is. We have one more question for Sulari Gentill, whose marvelous book, The Woman in the Library, is out today in the US. Great cover, says Gail. Is it different in other countries? Let's see. Do you have one?
This is the Australian cover, which is, hold on, where am I? There. Which is kind of wacky, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it gives such a different vision. I mean, I always think of this as the magic of the book coming out.
It's really interesting. The American cover is sort of beautiful and dark and literary and mysterious, and the Australian cover is sort of murder is fun. It's a really, I thought it was hilarious, the difference between the covers. I remember when the Australians sent me their cover, all I could do was laugh for about 5 minutes.
Was that a laugh of loving it, or a laugh of surprise, or a laugh of, oh my golly, I never thought about it this way?
It was a bit of all of that. It's quite lovely to have two very different covers, because you kind of, get cake and ice cream at the same time. But I think, and I was just really surprised. So they focused on a different facet of the book. I was doing a session with a fellow crime writer who had read the book, and he said he thought that both covers really depicted the book accurately, even though they were so different. So I think the Australians there's concentrated on the fact that the book is quite funny in parts.
Yes, so funny and so fun, so much fun to read.
Yeah, so they concentrated on that, whilst the Americans concentrated on the metafictional aspects and the literary aspects of the book. So, who knows what other countries will come up with. I quite enjoyed it because, my previous series, the American covers are almost the same as the Australian covers. So this felt like I was being given an extra cover.
Oh,
Uh, an
lovely.
extra.
Well, it's interesting because you can tell a book by both covers, but what's inside the book is the same, and it is
Yeah.
absolutely immersive and marvelous and so much fun to read. Thank you, Solari, for the gift of this book. I absolutely loved it. I know I've said that a million times, but it's funny and profound and so clever and so intricate. And the ending gave me absolute chills. I mean, absolute chills. It almost felt like, oh, there's got to be another book.
Well, I think the ending, I hope to hand things over to the reader, because I suppose in the end we always hand our books over to the reader for them to think about and decide how it all came out. But can I just say, more than almost any review or any endorsement, your support has been such an incredible honor. I'm just, it's something that I'll take with me for the rest of my life. It's just amazing. And what you do for not just me, but for all writers is just so generous and um, such a role model to all of us. Whenever I think of, or whenever I get asked to endorse a manuscript or to read a manuscript of a new writer, now I think about all the help that you and people like you have given my books, and of course I say yes, because it's a sense of solidarity and kindness that you've modeled so beautifully and generously to us all.
Oh my goodness, thank you. I'm about to cry, but I'm so grateful for that. And that is wonderful to hear. And you were so generous to say that. But honestly, you all, there is nothing better than finding a wonderful new book. It is my joy. And I am so happy to be able to share this book with you and cannot wait for you all to read it. Thank you, Solari. I cannot wait to read your next book. Bring them on, bring them on. Is it another standalone, or is it a Roland Sinclair or something?
There is another standalone that was actually written before this one. It was another book I was writing, and COVID changed it. So it was, sometimes books don't stand up after what's happened. It changes the world, and so I had to go back and rewrite certain aspects of it because our understanding of the world and people has changed.
So it got a little water and a little sunshine and a little new
Yeah,
world, and
yeah,
out it came, up it grew.
yes,
That is marvelous.
absolutely.
Thank you. Oh, we are so out of time, you all. Let's draw a winner. Let's see who will win on the Wheel of Fun. We'll now spin the Wheel of Fun and see who can. This is my favorite part. I love this. Isn't that hilarious? And the winner is Christina Mandy. Mandy Shalal, welcome to the winner's circle, Mandy. It is wonderful that you won this. That is great. Should we pick another winner, do you think? Let's pick another winner, because I think Mandy might already have a copy of this book. Let's try it one more
Mandy's
time.
my brilliant publicist.
Yeah. So she might be the one sending the winner. That proves to you all, does it not, that the Wheel of Fun is absolutely random. So Margaret, will it work again? Let's try it one more time. Draw again. Okay. If Mandy wins again, that's going to be a situation. Yes, and the winner is Sharon Carlson Person. That is marvelous, and she has been such a stalwart here on Crime Time. So Sharon, that's great, and you'll email me, and we'll get you. I think Mandy will actually get you a copy of The Woman in the Library. Sulari, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for coming.
Look at all the people. It's been great. I hope you will look at the comments when we're finished, when you wake up a little bit more. You have 2 cups of coffee and be able to see all the people who came. Let me tell you all who are listening right now, I'm turning to pick up, look who we have next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, the fabulous Julie Clark, whose newest book is The Lies I Tell. And I got to tell you that the minute this show is over, I'm going to begin reading this book. Julie Clark is terrific. Have you read this yet, Sulari?
No, but I have it on my list. I've ordered it, but I think it has to come from America because I haven't seen it in Australia as yet.
It's not out yet. It's not out
Yeah,
yet.
yeah. So it's.
Well, maybe you
in
can come to Crime Time and win it. That could be.
I could.
The wheel of fun may stop for you. You all, we have just, Sulari and I have just talked for way too long, and we're so thrilled that you all have stuck with us for this interview about this absolutely terrific book. So until next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, you know what I always say, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.